Chapter 34. Sig, said Stephanie through her tablet. She had been so happy when she had located a new one at a store on the way to the cave, and she had purchased it immediately. Have you gone up against the demon prophetess? She asked through her tablet. Not personally, said Sig. Her people were there when we found Lucas, though. Why do you ask? Started Stephanie. She paused as she decided how to phrase her response before typing again. All of the other divine keys represent unique abilities, but her ability is very similar to my own. And that worries you? Asked Sig. Yes, replied Stephanie. I can't see it clearly, but it feels like she is anticipating our movements. How can you be sure of that? Asked Sig. I have had visions of the future, and she is always... Stephanie shuddered slightly before continuing to type. Watching me. What have you seen? Asked Sig in a more solemn tone. After this business with Abaddon, we will try to go back to our own time, said Stephanie. And Archdemon's hand will be waiting for us. We won't have the benefit of someone like Carson Price, who is willing to work with us. They can't beat us, said Sig with a wide smile. Stephanie looked away. I hope you're right, said Stephanie. Though the tablet she had obtained could not put much emphasis or tone into her words, Sig could tell from her expression that she was less convinced. What exactly did you see, Stephanie? Asked Sig. Swarms of demon worshippers, said Stephanie. They were breathing fire and predicting our movements. There were others moving with incredible speed. Also, there was a person wearing a skull mask that was raising the ones we killed to fight again. Catherine Page and David Sawyer, said Row 82, who had been listening to the conversation. Yes, replied Stephanie. And Sarah Hawkins and Felix Light. But Lizard killed Felix Light, said Sig. But Catherine has the ability to bring him back, replied Row 82. She must be the reason that they have survived for hundreds of years. We could handle them, said Sig confidently. Perhaps, replied Stephanie, but I got the feeling that someone else was headed for us that was even more powerful. What makes you say that? Asked Row 82 skeptically. Because I saw Sarah Hawkins running away, replied Stephanie. She might have been running away from us, said Sig. Possible, but I didn't get that impression, replied Stephanie. Her eyes were filled with fear as she continued. Since both of you were screaming that we needed to leave, you said something about some woman that had found us. Row 82 and Sig looked at one another for a moment with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What happened next? Asked Sig. Everything went black, replied Stephanie. Suddenly Lizard teleported in. He had a smile on his face as he scurried up to the others. They just don't make cheeseburgers like they used to, he said with a smile. Everyone else remained in solemn thought. Lizard looked around in confusion. Something I said? He asked. No, we're discussing our imminent demise, said Row 82 matter-of-factly. What? Asked Lizard. Stephanie had a vision of us in the future being swarmed by demon worshippers, said Sig. I can't stand demon worshippers, said Lizard with air quotes. Me neither, said Jonathan as he and Kirana approached the others. Stephanie smiled as she saw him in spite of herself. As she saw him holding Kirana's hand, she closed her eyes and turned away. She had tried hard not to think about Jonathan, but seeing him and then noticing his more public show of affection for Kirana brought a flood of bitter feelings. She tried hard to focus on what was going to happen in the caves, but she found it nearly impossible to focus. She had overcome her dislike of Kirana, but the pain of Jonathan's rejection became nearly unbearable. She finally excused herself to get some water. As soon as she was a short distance away, she let the tears she had been holding in pour down her slender cheeks. Her body shook as she silently sobbed. Her eyesight blurred, but she continued moving away from the others. She hardly noticed the blue tint that began to creep up all around her, plummeting her into another vision of the future. The noisy blast of fireballs erupting threw her off guard. She spun around and watched as Lizard blinked in between hundreds of robed demon worshippers, disabling them quickly. Kirana swung her burning blade at clusters of others, but they seemed to be able to anticipate her movements. Sig had created a defensive dome around Jennifer, Victor, Lucas, and Row 82. The golden shield was being constantly pelted by explosive fireballs, but she could tell that those inside the shield were safe. Jennifer was unconscious, and Victor was focused completely on her. He was saying something, but she could not hear him. Suddenly she was distracted by the sight of Jonathan. She realized that she was with him, and together they were shooting and slashing through large numbers of enemies. It brought a mix of emotions to see herself with Jonathan. She turned away again to focus on Victor. Something about what he was saying seemed important. She rushed over to him to try to get a better perspective. As she approached, she became able to read his lips. He was asking her what he was supposed to do. Tears were rolling down his cheeks. Stephanie recognized the look of despair in his eyes. She looked down at Jennifer. There was blood on her clothing, and she could tell that he had healed her of a terrible wound. "He believes that they have failed," came a voice from behind her. It was Michael. "Michael," said Stephanie as she turned toward him. "Watch very carefully," said Michael as he pointed back to him. "They're running away," shouted Kirana with relief in her voice. "From them," shouted Stephanie's other self. Stephanie turned and saw herself pointing to a hill several hundred yards away. The silhouettes of several large creatures appeared around a small female, who Stephanie was not able to see clearly. "Row 82, shouted Lucas. "Get them back to the shield." Row 82's eyes glowed as he rushed and scooped up Jonathan and Kirana, slinging them over his shoulders. "Stephanie Mason," said Row 82, "you must come too." After a short time, everyone except Lizard had gathered under the protection of Sig's heavenly shield. "Victor, we need Jonathan to attack the mind of William Fine," said Row 82. Victor rushed over and helped heal the cuts and bruises on his body. "He's not waking up," said Row 82 impatiently. "He's exhausted," said Victor. "His body is healed, but it still needs rest. It will likely be the same with Kirana." "I hate to say this, but Sig needs some rest too," whispered Lucas. They turned and watched Sig holding up his hands. Sweat had beaded up on his forehead, and he was breathing heavily. Huge numbers of fireballs were pelting the shield, and Sig was obviously growing weary. A few moments later, Lizard appeared in the dome and lost consciousness. Stephanie watched as despair came to the faces of her friends. "I'm sorry," said Victor. "I don't know what to do." "What's wrong with Jennifer?" whispered Stephanie. "She spent a great deal of energy finding the rest of you," replied Michael. "Jennifer Cedar will die if you cannot figure it out," said Row 82 coldly. Victor turned back to Jennifer and knelt beside her, running his fingers through her blonde hair. "Tell him he can use it," said Michael to Stephanie. "What?" said Stephanie in confusion. "Use what?" She turned to face Victor again since Michael did not reply. She watched her other self place her hand on Victor's shoulder and nod. Victor's eyes grew wide. "What did I say?" asked Stephanie as she tried to get closer. She did not get an answer to her question, and a moment later everything went black. It was several minutes before Stephanie regained consciousness. When she did, she found Lucas sitting next to her with a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" asked Lucas. Stephanie wiped her eyes, remembering her emotional state when she had left the others. She sat up and nodded, but the truth was that she was terribly confused. She did not know what her vision meant. She wished that Michael had not been so cryptic. "Where are the others?" asked Lucas. Stephanie slowly pointed back to the place from which she had come. "Well, be careful, Stephanie," said Lucas. "I don't want anything bad to happen to you." His genuine concern was touching, and Stephanie responded with a smile. Slowly they got back up and returned to the others. "Lucas," said Sig enthusiastically as he saw him approach. "Hello," said Lucas with a smile. "Now we're just waiting for Jennifer and Victor," said Jonathan. "They're almost here," said Row 82. Soon enough, the two of them came up to meet the others. "Today is the day, right?" asked Victor as he approached. Sig nodded with a wide smile. "It was nice to have a vacation," he replied, "but it will be nicer to put this whole thing to rest. Did you find anything that we should know?" Victor cleared his throat, awkwardly searching for how to convey what he was thinking. "The Archangel Michael," started Victor. "He seemed to indicate that we would be successful in changing the future, but there might be unexpected consequences." "Unexpected meaning what?" asked Lizard. "Since this is an unplanned change that affects the future, we will be ripped from this time and thrown back into our time," said Victor. "So we can immediately see if we were successful," said Lucas. "That's actually convenient. But because Jennifer is not from the future, she will not come with us," said Victor. "I don't see that as a major obstacle to the one who can travel through time," said Row 82. "Also," said Victor, "the rest of us not having access to that power seemed to worry Michael." "Going up against the Destroyer didn't worry him?" asked Kirana with a hint of anger. Sig rubbed his chin. "Stephanie has had visions of the future that indicate we might be in a difficult situation as well," said Sig. "In spite of that, I am convinced that this is the right thing to do." "So am I," said Kirana. "We brought Daniel Young back without knowing who he was. We should be the ones to make that right." "I agree," said Lizard as he enthusiastically air-quoted. "Michael was concerned about our survival," said Jennifer, "so that must mean that there is a chance we will all be okay when this is said and done." "We are fit to survive," said Row 82. The others scowled at his use of the augment term. "But for the first time, I am beginning to believe that we are supposed to survive." Sig laughed loudly. "No second guessing then," said Sig. "Tonight is the night. The moon will be full, just as it was when we first came to this time. We will remain hidden, and once our other selves are gone, we will take care of the Destroyer." Each of them seemed to smile with resolve and confidence as they prepared for their task. Of course, none of them knew how bad the repercussions of this act would prove to be.